They laughed when I held it up, a rusty key, pitted and bent like it belonged to a janitor, not the son of a man worth tens of millions. My name is Lucas Everett. I'm 38. I fix things that don't want to be fixed, clocks, radios, family names. At my father's will reading, everyone got something shiny. A mansion, stock options, trust funds. I got a key. Jake chuckled. Dad really did want you stuck in the past. Helen offered a pitiful smile. Sentimental value, maybe. And for a while, I believed them. Until 6 months later, when the IRS showed up at my door, said they'd discovered a hidden vault under my father's name. Said my name was attached too. When we opened it, the room went silent. Inside, documents, gold, paintings, and $30 million in unreported assets. And the only thing that could unlock it was that a stupid key? Your father left you. This, the lawyer said, sliding the key across the table like it was a used paperclip. Everyone looked at it. Rusty. Bent. A little flake of orange dust fell off the edge and landed near my untouched water glass. Jake leaned back in his leather chair and smirked. Looks like Dad wanted you to fix something for once. Laughter rippled through the room. My cousin Helen whispered something to her husband and tried to hide her grin behind a tissue. The lawyer, Carla, cleared her throat. Jacob Everett inherits the family home in Belle Haven, full rights to the Everett Family Trust, and controlling interest in Everett Holdings. Helen McAllister receives diversified stock portfolios totaling $4. $2 million. She paused. And Lucas Everett, full legal ownership of safe deposit box number 1174. And that key. I stared at it. My name, just 3 syllables, had been reduced to a line item and a chunk of rusted metal. I picked it up. It was cold, and it smelled like wet pennies and old wood. What the hell is this? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Carla didn't flinch. That's all the will specifies. Your father said, you'd understand. Jake snorted. Guess you got all the sentiment, huh? Helen nodded. Or maybe he just forgot to throw that away before he died. Something in my chest cracked. Not broken, but cracked. I stood up. The room quieted. I didn't say a word. I just walked out, key in hand, heat rising behind my eyes. The hallway outside the firm was colder than I remembered. I stared at the key, wondering if I should chuck it into the storm drain. That's when I heard heels behind me. Lucas, a voice said gently. I turned to see Joan Meyer, my father's longtime assistant. She looked tired, older than the last time I saw her. He trusted you, she said, her eyes locked on the key in my hand. I raised an eyebrow. With what? A janitor's job? She didn't smile. Your dad wasn't sentimental, not like people think. If he left you that, it's not trash. Don't throw it away. I stared at her, searching her face for a hint of sarcasm. Nothing. Do you know what it opens? I asked. She hesitated. No, but I know your dad didn't trust many people, and he sure as hell didn't trust Jake. She turned and walked back inside, leaving me alone with the stupid key. I stood there a long time, flipping it over, watching the flakes fall off like it was shedding something. A memory surfaced, Dad once told me. The important stuff doesn't shine. Back then, I thought he meant life lessons, character, all that boring stuff. But what if he meant something else? What if this key didn't represent the past? What if it guarded it? What could be important enough for Dad to hide behind a lock no one even remembers? I walked into the bank holding the rusty key like a piece of evidence. The marble floors were spotless, the air faintly sweet from some kind of citrus spray. People in suits moved around me, polite, distracted. I went straight to the clerk's desk. Hi, I said, setting the key on the counter. I need access to safe deposit box number 1174. It's in my name. The clerk, young, clean-shaven, practiced a smile, typed quickly, eyes flicking from screen to me. Then he frowned. I'm sorry, sir. That box number doesn't exist in our system. I blinked. Try Lucas Everett. My father had an account here for decades. He typed again, slower, shook his head. We have nothing under that number and no linked records. Are you sure you have the right bank? I glanced at the key. Rust flaked onto the countertop. I'm sure, I said quietly. He gave me the same careful look you give someone who's lost something they never really had. "I'm sorry, sir." I walked out into the parking lot feeling ridiculous. A 38-year-old man is chasing a ghost box with a janitor's key. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from Joan Meyer. "Don't give up. It's not a bank." I called her immediately. "Joan, what do you mean it's not a bank?" Her voice came through low and steady. "Your father mentioned Box 1174 once. Said it wasn't at a bank. Said it was off-grid." My stomach tightened. "Off-grid? Like offshore?" "Check the envelope the key came in," she said. He liked to hide clues where people wouldn't look. I hung up, sat in my car, and tore through the small envelope Carla had given me at the will reading. Nothing at first, just the key, some legal paperwork. Then, at the very back, a worn business card. On the front, East Meridian Financial Services, Private Holdings Division. On the back, in my father's handwriting, 1174, third floor vault, discreet entrance. I stared at it. East Meridian wasn't a bank. It was a private offshore vault company, the kind people whispered about when they didn't want taxes or fingerprints on anything. I booked a flight that night. The next morning, I was standing in front of a gray glass building in a financial district where no one smiled and everything smelled like printer ink and rain. The sign read, East Meridian Private Holdings. No flags, no windows on the lower floors. Just a heavy brass door and a black intercom panel. Inside, the lobby was as quiet as a library. 2 guards stood near an elevator bank, their faces blank, their suits tailored. A receptionist with a headset looked up at me. "I'm here for safe deposit box 1174, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She blinked once. "Name?" "Lucas Everett." Her fingers hesitated on the keyboard. "One moment, sir." She disappeared through a side door. Minutes stretched. A guard shifted his weight. Finally, she came back. Her smile was fixed, but her eyes were tense. "I'm sorry, Mr. Everett. We can't grant access to that vault at this time." "Can't?" I asked. "It's mine." She opened her mouth, closed it again, and then I heard a different voice behind me. "Lucas Everett." I turned. 2 people in dark suits stood just inside the door. Badges flashed, fast enough to show authority, but not enough for me to read the agency. One of them said, "We're with the IRS. We need to speak with you about that vault." Vault access was denied until the IRS showed up asking for me by name. Either you're the victim of a crime, or the beneficiary of one. That's the first thing Agent Riley Shaw said to me as we sat in a windowless room inside East Meridian Holdings. No coffee, no water. Just a cold table and 2 agents with sharpened eyes. I shifted in my chair, heart pounding. "I don't even know what I'm doing here," I said. "I just got a key. For my dad's will." Agent Shaw didn't blink. "Do you know what Form 8938 is?" "No," I admitted. "Foreign asset disclosure," he said. "It's required when someone holds money or property overseas. Your father never filed one." I frowned. He had accounts in Switzerland. Agent Shaw glanced at his partner, then leaned forward. "Try Panama, Luxembourg, the Isle of Man, and one very specific box in this building." He slid a photo across the table. A grainy black and white image of a safety deposit vault. The number burned into the steel door, 1174. "That's mine," I said quietly. "I mean, it's what he left me." Agent Shaw narrowed his eyes. "And you're telling us you have no idea what's inside?" "No," I said. "He died without ever explaining it." "Did he ever mention offshore assets?" the other agent asked. Her voice was calm, but I could feel the tension underneath. "He was always private," I said. "But no, not like this." Shaw folded his arms. "Look, Lucas, this isn't about your feelings. This is about $30 million worth of assets that were never disclosed to the IRS. We have reason to believe those assets are in that box. And your name's on the vault registry." My palms were damp. "All I have is this." I pulled the key from my jacket pocket and placed it gently on the table. It looked even more ridiculous under the harsh lights, old, pitted, scratched. The agents both stared at it. For a second, nobody moved. Shaw reached out slowly, lifted it with a gloved hand. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "It's real." I sat straighter. "So what does that mean?" "It means," he said, "you're not crazy." He stood up, motioned to the other agent. "We've been waiting on a lead like this for over a year. Your father kept everything under layers of shell corporations and silent trustees. But this box, it might be the only physical link left." I swallowed hard. "So, what happens now?" Shaw looked at me, expression unreadable. "Now we open it." But not alone. I followed them down a silent corridor, my footsteps sounding heavier than they should have. The air felt thick with something I couldn't name. Truth, maybe. Or danger, or both. The elevator dinged. 3rd floor. Private vault access. Shaw keyed in a code. The security system blinked green. The massive door groaned open. Behind it was a hallway lined with steel. Each door is identical. Cold. Impersonal. Except one. Box in 1174. I stepped toward it. Shaw stopped me. "If that key opens what we think it does," he said quietly, "your family's about to get very quiet. Some vaults are meant to store secrets. Others are built to bury them." We pulled up to a steel and glass building tucked behind a fake logistics company in the financial district. No signs, no logos, just a keypad on a silver door and a camera that followed every move. Agent Riley Shaw stepped out first, flashed his badge. I followed, clutching that same old key like it could still somehow explain everything. The guard barely looked up. "You're expected," he said. "Expected?" I looked at Riley. He didn't answer. We were led down a stairwell, then through a biometric scanner, and finally into a narrow corridor lined with vault doors. Most were labeled with silent numbers and dusty plaques, but at the very end, Box 1174. No plaque, just a single silver keyhole. The government locksmith stepped forward, toolbox in hand. "We might need to drill if it's jammed." I held up the key. "Let me try first." It slid in without resistance. One soft turn, and I heard the satisfying click of mechanisms that hadn't moved in decades. The door creaked open. Cold air spilled out, dry and untouched. Inside, the vault looked like something out of an old mob movie. Everything was stacked neatly, waiting in silence. Original property deeds with wax seals. Gold bars stamped with foreign banks I'd never heard of. Bearer bonds with values I couldn't pronounce. A painting I swore I'd seen on the wall of my father's study in 1992. And, tucked in the back, sealed manila folders, unfiled tax documents, letters, receipts, wire transfers with names blacked out. Agent Shaw let out a slow breath. "Untouched since 1997. I stepped inside, careful not to brush against anything. "How is this even possible?" He didn't answer. "Was this legal?" I asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Not even close." The locksmith whistled, looking over the gold bars. "Your dad had his own private treasury down here." My stomach turned. I picked up one of the letters. It was addressed to a foundation that didn't exist anymore. Something called Everett Holdings, Zurich Division. In the corner, my father's handwriting. Sharp, controlled, underlined twice. "Do not disclose." I turned to Riley. Who else knew about this? He didn't blink. "That's what we intend to find out," he said. But I could see it in his face, the same suspicion that had been growing in mine since the will reading. This wasn't just about taxes, or inheritance, or some hidden wealth Dad didn't want the IRS to touch. This was a message, and someone else knew it was about to be opened. Somewhere in this maze of sealed records and gold-stamped silence was a secret someone would kill to keep buried. And I just cracked it open. The thing about silence is, it always has a reason, and usually it's not a good one. I showed up unannounced at Raymond Cross's office, the family's estate lawyer for over 2 decades, and the man who read my father's will like it was gospel. But now, I wanted the verses he didn't read aloud. Raymond looked up from a pile of documents, startled but not surprised. "I need answers," I said. My voice was steady, but my chest was burning. You've been quiet long enough. He took off his glasses, folded them carefully. Lucas, there are things I was ethically bound not to reveal. Don't give me the lawyer act, I snapped. You watched Jake take everything. You watched my name get dragged. You slid that key across the table like it was an afterthought. Raymond sighed, rubbing his temple. I warned your father, he finally said. I told him not updating the will would create conflict, but he didn't want a war with Helen or Jake. I blinked. So he knew? Raymond nodded. He started building a parallel legacy, separate from the formal estate. That vault you found? It wasn't an accident. He wanted a path only you could unlock, but he didn't want to trigger them while he was alive. Them. Jake, Helen. I sat down across from him. You were his lawyer. Why didn't you make it official? His voice dropped. Because your father believed legacy wasn't about paper. It was about trust. I laughed bitterly. He trusted the wrong people. Raymond didn't argue. He reached into a drawer, then slid over a thin, leather-bound folder. These are the files he compiled over the years. Most of it's dry, contracts, duplicates, and asset flows. But this, he tapped the second tab. This is what you'll want to see. Inside were financial ledgers, old but detailed. Dad's original asset list from 2005, then revisions from 2007, 2011, and finally 2016. The problem? Why are half the entries missing? I asked. Raymond exhaled slowly. Those redaction were done by Jake, just months before your father's stroke. I stared at the ink marks. Some entire pages were gone. Whole assets disappeared like they never existed. He said it was for simplification, Raymond added, his tone sour. But when I raised concerns, Helen told me to stay in my lane. Of course she did. I flipped to the last page and froze. A shipping receipt from 2006, addressed to the same private vault we'd visited days ago. Item, 1 sealed crate, contents undisclosed. Sender, Helen Everett. Signature, clear, bold, undeniable. She knew, I said. My voice felt far away. Raymond just nodded. I stood slowly, the weight of betrayal pressing down like a lead blanket. Why didn't you say anything? His answer was quiet, but cold. Because in this family, truth was always the most dangerous inheritance. I left his office with the folder under my arm and fire in my veins. Helen's signature was more than proof. It was permission. She had her hands on that vault long before the key ever found mine, and I was done staying quiet. Jake always said money was clean if no one looked too closely. I used to laugh it off, but walking into that marble-tiled bank office, I wasn't laughing anymore. Derek Klein, Helen's private banker, had the kind of smile that made you feel like your questions were inconvenient. I need to understand how my stepmother moved those assets, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Derek leaned back, steepling his fingers. Mr. Carter, most of what your father owned was off the books. Miss Helen simply kept it that way. You mean she hid it? She cleaned it, he replied coolly. Shell entities, offshore funds, antique sales through proxies. It's how powerful families protect legacies. My stomach turned. You're telling me some of those items in the vault were laundered? He exhaled. Some of them were never supposed to be found, Mr. Carter. That's when the door burst open. Jake stormed in like a man who had just lost control of his kingdom. You went to the vault? He shouted. You had no right. I stood. Dad left me the key. You don't get it, do you? Jake's voice cracked with rage. You're ruining everything Dad built. Everything we kept alive. You think that junk in there means you're owed something? I clenched my fists. Dad left me nothing but a key, and yet it's unlocking more truth than your $1 million inheritance. Jake stepped closer. You think exposing this helps you? It'll bury all of us. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Jake. It'll bury what you and Helen tried to steal." Jake laughed bitterly. "You always were the soft one. The sentimental little strayed dad felt sorry for." That hit harder than I expected, but I didn't flinch. Klein cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Perhaps this isn't the place." But before he could finish, my phone buzzed. It was Riley. "Lucas," she said without hesitation, "we found something." "What is it?" "There's a hidden compartment behind one of the paintings, sealed, reinforced." My breath caught. "Another vault?" "No," she said. "A locked box, small, heavy, same make as the first key. We think it matches." I looked over at Jake, whose expression had gone from furious to pale. "You okay, brother?" I asked, my voice sharp. He didn't answer, just turned and walked out, fists clenched, jaw tight. I turned back to Derek. "I want a full transaction record of every movement Helen made, every fund, every shell, every crate." He hesitated. "That could expose a lot of people. Start with her. She signed the shipping receipt. I saw it." Derek's face drained. "You have that receipt?" "I do now." Outside, the sky was darkening, but something inside me was waking up. Not revenge, not greed. Truth. And the truth had sharp edges. I didn't know what was inside that second box, but Jake's reaction told me everything I needed to know. So, when Riley's voice came through the phone again, low and cautious, I listened carefully. "We're bringing in gloves and tools," she said. "Whatever's in that compartment, it was hidden for a reason." I stepped into the elevator, heart pounding, the key cold in my pocket. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten son. I felt like the fuse, because something was about to blow. You think you're ready for the truth until it stares you down from a news headline. "Family fortune hidden in vault unlocked by rusty key." That was the one that started it. Then came the swarm. Cable news anchors, blog posts, business podcasts. Everyone wanted to know how a bent key uncovered $30 million in undeclared wealth, and how the forgotten son unlocked it. I woke up that morning with 34 missed calls. Joan left a voicemail whispering, "They're freezing everything. Be careful." Riley called next. "It's official. The IRS filed both civil and criminal actions. Wire fraud, tax evasion, and asset concealment. It's a storm now, Lucas." By the time I turned on the TV, Helen's name was everywhere. She'd frozen all joint accounts, including mine. Jake wasn't quiet either. Helen's name was everywhere. She'd frozen all joint accounts, including mine. Jake wasn't quiet either. He went on a podcast and spat venom. "He's not even a real Carter," Jake said. "He was adopted. My father had a soft spot, but that doesn't make him family." That one stung, even more than the silence that followed from so many so-called relatives. My lawyer called. "Jake's threatening to sue for emotional damages. He claims you're defaming the family legacy." I let out a bitter laugh. Funny how truth feels like defamation when you've lived a lie. But it wasn't just noise anymore. People were picking sides, and the side I was on, it was finally being heard. Late that afternoon, Raymond Cross showed up unannounced at my place, the same estate lawyer who had handed out everyone's inheritance like candy, except mine. He looked different now, older, tired, but there was something in his eyes that felt human. "I have something for you," he said quietly. He handed me an envelope. The seal was cracked, but the paper inside was stiff and heavy. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was familiar. Dad's. "If you're reading this, it means the key wasn't ignored. It also means you're standing alone. You don't owe them silence, Lucas. Not anymore." I sat back. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of finally being seen. Raymond's voice broke the silence. He tried to change the will. Jake and Helen pressured him. He stalled, hoping to do it when things calmed down. But they never did. "Why didn't you speak up?" I asked, my voice tight. I was legally bound until the investigation started. And until you proved you weren't afraid. For the first time, I didn't see him as the man who gave me nothing. I saw him as the last man who knew the truth and had been waiting for someone to earn it. Before he left, he paused at the door. "There's more buried, Lucas. This was just one layer." Not an hour later, Riley called. Her tone was sharp, urgent. "We just got a call from Treasury. There may be another vault. Different location. Same holding pattern." My breath caught. "What do you mean, another vault?" We traced a signature tied to one of the offshore shell funds. It was used twice, and Lucas, she hesitated. "Your name is attached again." For a moment, everything stopped. My heartbeat, my breath, the air itself felt heavier. One vault was enough to turn the world upside down. But two, that meant the game hadn't even started yet. The thing about silence is, it only lasts until someone claims the mic. And today, it was mine. After weeks of digging, stalling, and getting stonewalled, I stood before the court with my back straight, a quiet fire in my chest, and Carla, our family's litigation shark, at my side. She was calm, clinical. "Your Honor, we are invoking fiduciary mismanagement. Based on misappropriated funds, lack of full disclosure, and conflicts of interest, my client requests a suspension of Ethan Carter's trustee powers pending a full forensic audit." "Eat your teeth in it," Ethan scoffed from across the room, adjusting his designer cufflinks like this was just a boardroom delay. "Lucas is just bitter," he said, his voice smug. "He didn't get what he wanted, and now he wants to burn it down." But I didn't flinch. "Your Honor," Carla said, "this isn't revenge. It's their responsibility." The judge reviewed the evidence, wire transfers, shell accounts, and asset movement around the time of Dad's stroke. And then he nodded. "In light of the documentation presented, I am granting Mr. Lucas Everett temporary oversight over the full estate." Effective immediately. The words hit Ethan like a slap. He stood, lips twitching. "This is a circus." I met his eyes, calm but unyielding. "Then sit back and watch the show." Later that afternoon, I sat down with families, people Dad had done business with, institutions he owed restitution to, and small museum boards who had lost track of artifacts on loan. They weren't angry, just tired. One older woman, head of a historical trust, shook my hand with both of hers. "Your father had power. But you have a conscience." That's rarer. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded. Back at the IRS field office, Riley was waiting with something I hadn't expected. "Lucas," she said, setting a folder on the table. "The second vault. We traced the ownership documents." I braced myself. She opened the folder. "It's in your name, signed, not forged. Transferred 2 years before your father's death." "What?" I whispered. "But I never knew about this." "I never signed. You didn't," she said. "He did. He gave it to you." A chill ran through me. Why? Why hide it from me all this time? Why bury this until now? As I left the office, the sky outside had turned gray. A storm was building, both in the clouds and in the headlines. And as the estate's power formally shifted, so did the people. I watched as Helen, once so regal, so cold, was escorted out of the boardroom under federal oversight. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just walked, shoulders stiff, lips tight. But as she passed me, she leaned in, just enough for only me to hear. "Your father built it," she whispered. "But you buried us." Her breath smelled like bitterness and fear. I didn't reply, because deep down, I knew she was right. But what she didn't realize is that I was just getting started. Some doors don't open with noise. They open with silence, and the courage to turn the key anyway. I stood alone inside a concrete vault beneath an anonymous financial building. No press, no agents, no Carla, not even Riley. Just me, and a lock that hadn't been touched in decades. The key, my so-called toy, clicked into place and turned. Inside, there wasn't gold. No art, no bearer bonds or paper trails. Just a small leather-bound journal. Sealed with red wax. My father's initials are carved into it. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside the first page, in his handwriting, "I gave them wealth. I gave you the truth." I stood still for what felt like an hour, reading his words. Every sentence peeled away another layer of the man I thought I knew. He hadn't been clueless. He hadn't been blind to what Jake and Helen were doing. He was documenting it, and waiting for me to be ready. The next week, I launched the Everett Legacy Foundation. Not for legacy. For accountability. Its mission: protect whistleblowers, investigate buried corporate fraud, and push for full financial transparency in family-run firms like ours. I handed the first check to a small-town librarian who'd been fired for reporting embezzlement. She cried. I couldn't afford to anymore. The camera drone buzzed overhead as we filmed the vault. The original one, now sealed under federal order, with yellow evidence tape across its metal doors. Riley stood next to me, arms crossed, wind in her hair. She smirked. Not bad for a guy with a toy key. I exhaled softly. He was telling the truth, just not the one they wanted to hear. She nodded. Most people don't want the truth. They want control. As she walked away, I stayed a little longer, staring at the now locked vault door. I thought that was the end of it. But that night, back in my apartment, I opened the journal again. Toward the back, one last page I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a farewell. It was a GPS coordinate. Latitude, longitude, elevation, somewhere remote. And under that line, just one final sentence in Dad's clean, unmistakable handwriting. There's one thing even they never found. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the journal slowly, placed it back inside the envelope, and sat in the dark for a long time. Because if this journey had taught me anything, it was that secrets buried in silence don't stay buried forever.